I received 2 emails in the last month inquiring whether there'd be any benefit in installing not 1 but 2 regulators into your field target rifle, running one behind the other. I think both these questions come from gentlemen who are going to make their own regulators using Belleville washers so as to make them as small and compact as possible, and they wanted to know whether there'd be any great benefit from doing this. I think the answer is yes and no, and what I mean by this is your regulator at the moment generally gives a very consistent readout in the outlet valve chamber, you know, even when there's such a large drop from the main reservoir. And then you've got the self-regulating effect of the outlet valve mechanism. So the best records that I get people send to me about my regulators are over a string of 40 shots. The best they'd get would be a 6 feet per second variation. Typically is between 6 and 12. So that's fairly good, you know, if you've got a 177 and it's doing around 800 feet a second. So installing a second regulator, although it would have a slight improvement on the regulation of the outlet valve chamber, I think in the general scale of things, trying to measure any noticeable difference in the output of the air rifle would be very difficult. The reason I say this is the regulator is just a very small part of the shooting mechanism. I mean, when you put the regulator in, a regulator is not a solve-all, fix-all item. It is only one cog in a chain of cogs. You've got to remember that you've got the outlet valve itself, the shape and design of that, the hammer, how far the hammer's travelling, what sort of trigger mechanism you've got in your rifle. All these things add up to make the rifle consistent. I know there's rifles out there with different trigger mechanisms, and if you pull the trigger very sharp and quick, there'll be a few feet per second difference in the output of the speed of the pellet if you pull it very slow, and it slightly gradually goes off. So when you take everything into account, I think yes, there would be a little bit of an improvement, but measuring this would be exceptionally difficult. I mean, this is just the simplest example I could give is I typically use 15.5 grain pellets in my tutto, and if there was a 1% variation in the weight of that, that is just 0.155 grains, which is equal to 0.010044 grams. Now, I weighed a batch of pellets, I think about 2 weeks ago, and I found out that straight out of the tin there was about a 0.2 grain variation, which is about 1.5% difference. So anyway, sticking with the 1% difference, if you look at a 1% difference, it would give you, from 12 foot-pounds exactly, that would give you 11.88 foot-pounds. And when you look at the difference between the 12 foot-pounds and the 11.8 foot-pounds, you're talking 3 feet per second. So the minimum you're going to get is 3.3 feet per second difference. And with the batch I weighed, you're going to be looking then at 5 feet per second difference. So that's just one cog in the chain, just the weight of the pellet. So if you take everything else into consideration, measuring the difference of fitting 2 regulators, I think would be exceptionally difficult. Now, what might be a plus with the 2 regulators, it depends on your mental state of health, i.e. what sort of person you are, and are you exceptionally finicky. So if you're the sort of person that turns up at the range and you're sort of, you know, a bit nervous, is your equipment working okay, is it as good as it could be, then, you know, this obviously has an effect on your field target shooting. Lots of top athletes employ, you know, stress relievers and mental coaches and mentors, and so if you've got this on your mind that 2 regulators in your rifle will actually enhance your shooting, then although the difference might not be measurable, putting 2 regulators into you might have actually a great mental benefit, and then your shooting improves. The best example of this I can give from personal experience is I used to do cycle racing, and when we went out on training rides, 2 or 3 of my compatriots were far quicker than me, and I used to have a job to keep up with them. On race days, I'd be that wound up, being sick, shaking and in the right mental state, I'd always beat them. And it was that edge on the actual day that made the difference. So for you, if you're keen to put 2 regulators in, and you know, and that's what you'd like to do because it is going to have a little effect, the little effect that's unmeasurable here might have a massive mental effect and greatly improve your target shooting. So I hope that's been of some help, and if it's something that's playing on your mind and you're going to do it, then get on your lathe, make your regulators and fit 2 of them. One last thing which I forgot to mention before I go is, if you are going to fit 2 regulators into your rifle back to back, you don't fit them both at whatever output pressure you require. You don't fit them both at 100 bar. That would just be a waste of time, because if you spend hours trying to calibrate them both to exactly 100 bar, once they've worn in and you've used them a little bit, there could be a variation between the 2, and the one at the back might be giving a slightly lower output than the one at the front, which would just mean that only one regulator is working, only the back regulator is working, and the front one's a complete waste of time. You need to have a marked difference between the 2, and suggestedly a small little reservoir chamber of a few cc between them as well. So if you're setting the front one at 100 bar, you want to really be setting the rear one at say 110 to 120 bar, something where there is a measurable difference within the 2. Trying to set them both within a couple of bar of each other, I think, is going to end up leading to disaster. So just bear that in mind.